Welcome to New York Nonprofit Media. I'm Jeff Stein here in the CEO corner with former New York Supreme Court Justice Judy Kluger, who's also the Executive Director of Sanctuary for Families. Thank you so much for coming in to speak with us. Before we get started, maybe if you could just provide a little bit of an overview of what Sanctuary for Families does. I know you're involved in advocacy and a lot of great work. Yeah, so
well, first, it's a pleasure to be here to talk about Sanctuary's work. So Sanctuary for Families, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary, and we are the largest not-for-profit in the state providing services exclusively to victims of domestic violence and sex trafficking. We provide legal services, clinical services and counseling, economic empowerment, and we provide shelter to victims of domestic violence and trafficking. And we do a lot of advocacy to advocate for the issues that are important to our clients.
Mm-hmm. So personally, I know obviously you have decades of legal experience, with 25 years on the bench. What has that experience given you in approaching all these issues at Sanctuary for Families?
So I was a judge for 25 years, before that as a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And when I started, the landscape for domestic violence victims was very different than it is now. Domestic violence was considered just a family matter by many judges and law enforcement. And my career really paralleled the changes in societal views as well as law enforcement and the judiciary. I was the chief of the Domestic Violence and Sex Crimes Bureau in the District Attorney's Office. And then when I became a judge, I was able to really work on a lot of issues for litigants who were in the court facing domestic violence and trafficking. So I had the foundation for the kind of work I'm doing at Sanctuary. But of course, as a judge, you can't be an advocate in the same way one can when they're not a judge. And at some point, I felt that I had done what I could to make an impact, I hoped, on how these cases were handled in the court system. And when Sanctuary for Families kind of knocked on my door and asked if I would be interested in being their executive director, it was just a logical next step. And I sometimes joke around that I was freed to say exactly what I thought, and whereas a judge, you can't do that. So I was free to be an advocate and actually have had a wonderful year and a half at Sanctuary.
Yeah, I'd love to get your perspective. I know that you have really interesting story, both with your parents' background as Holocaust survivors. What is your sort of initial inspiration for getting into this line of work and trying to really help people who are in need in society?
So my parents were Holocaust survivors. My mother was in a concentration camp. My father lost many of his family. And they came to the United States, not together, they met here, but they had a great love for the United States, for the opportunity that it afforded them. They were victims of the worst kind of discrimination possible, and built new lives here and had such tremendous respect for this country and what it could do for people that I think instilled in me a kind of love of public service and the desire to help people less fortunate than myself.
Yeah. And as a leader of the organization, I think I read 200 employees, $20 million budget. I mean, that's a very large organization that you're running. What is your overarching philosophy in staying in touch with what is going on in the ground, but also being able to see the larger picture?
I mean, when I came to Sanctuary, the first thing I wanted to do is let people know who I was, learn about them. So I met individually with every person in the organization. It took me a couple of months, but it was a great opportunity to hear about them and also for them to learn about me. And I've kept that going. My practice is to meet with every new person who is hired and spend a little time with them. And not as an interview, they've already been hired, but just as an opportunity for them to know a little bit about me and vice versa. I also believe in having a strong leadership, but not I won't say quiet. I don't raise my voice to anyone. I let everybody know my expectations and trust that the people on my staff who are so committed committed to Sanctuary's work and mission will follow through. I believe in saying please and thank you. I believe in saying, I made a mistake. I believe in listening to other people's opinions. As a judge, you sit on the bench, you have to hear both sides and decide. So I like to give everybody a voice. I say not everybody has a voice, but not everybody has a vote.
Right.
So it served me well in my career, both as a prosecutor and as a bureau chief there and as a judge.
Great. Well, in terms of advocacy, I know that we were just talking about a big victory in the New York State legislature in terms of human trafficking. In March, there was an act that was passed that I know that Sanctuary for Families had a lot of involvement in. Going forward, what are your advocacy aims this year and further in the future to press on these issues?
So, of course, Sanctuary was one of the lead proponents and advocates for the change in the law for the victims of trafficking. The Trafficking Victims and Justice Act was a really huge milestone. Now we're focusing on making sure that implementation is as we hope it will be. And as always, listening to our clients and hearing what their needs are and addressing that both in terms of policy within the city and state, and also trying to influence legislation. So we will continue to work very hard in that area.
Great. Just sort of zooming out a little bit too, I always find it really interesting to speak to executive directors about trends overall in the nonprofit industry or sector that you recognize. It's obviously a challenging time for many organizations to stay afloat, to have grants and foundation support, and also working with government partners. How are you trying to navigate Sanctuary for Families through this, all of the actors in this space?
Sure. So first and foremost, we know what our mission is and we're committed to the mission, and we have to find a way to implement what our mission is talking about. So at Sanctuary, first of all, we have a strong, active board who is very helpful in terms of governance, but fundraising as well. We have a balanced budget, and that's very important to us. We try to have a good balance between government contracts and foundation and private funding, and we're about 60-40 now, which is pretty much where we want to be, not too heavily reliant on the government, but on the other hand, recognizing that there is a lot of support that the government can give us. We work very closely with city administration this year, particularly with the Commissioner of HRA, Stephen Banks. The de Blasio administration came in with a goal of assisting in terms of housing for not just the homeless population, but for our clients who are in shelter. As I mentioned, we have shelters. And the subsidies that were put in place and our work with HRA and the rest of the administration has really allowed us to navigate that in a way that's really very beneficial to Sanctuary's clients. We watch the bottom line, but also make sure that we are serving our clients in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that housing is obviously a big hot topic right now. What are your specific advocacy aims for your population? There's a dearth of affordable housing in New York City, and I'm sure it very much impacts the population that you serve. How are you trying to push government in the right direction?
So for Sanctuary's clients, particularly our clients in shelter, housing is key because they can only remain in shelter for a specific amount of time. And so it was pushing the administration to implement the LINKS programs, and they were primed to do that, but understanding that those are the needs that our clients have. We were able to secure more apartments in the NYCHA housing developments for our clients, which are very good options. Mm-hmm. We have housing specialists on our staff who work with clients to find, and affordable housing, much of what's characterized as affordable housing is not affordable to our clients, right, who are by and large poor, who have fled abusive situations, who need to become independent so that they can live on their own, support themselves, and be able to afford the housing that is available. So between the subsidies that are now provided, our ability to place people in NYCHA housing developments, as well as our work with economic empowerment. What we do is we teach real job skills to clients that we have, so that they can get jobs that pay a living wage, not just a minimum wage. So we are on all fronts addressing the housing crisis.
Great. And how would you like to see the organization expand under your leadership in all of the different areas that you're working on: housing, legal services, employment services?
So we just finished Sanctuary's strategic plan for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good time to talk about that.
Yeah.
So our goal is really to deepen our work as opposed to increase the number of people we serve. We serve about 12,000 clients a year now, and we do outreach and education to probably about 20,000 more in terms of the public, and some of our shorter term touches to clients. So what we want to do is make sure that we are continue to work on the housing issues from our clients, to continue to be able to have a situation where our clients are economically independent and stable. Mm-hmm. We want to look at our outcomes and our evaluations to measure, and by the way, that's important for not-for-profits now, to measure outcomes and measure our work so that we can support what we know are successful outcomes. So there are lots of areas that we're looking to deepen our work with children and make sure that we are assisting the children of our clients who are so impacted by domestic violence. So this is a great time for us because we have a 5-year plan and we're just starting to work on the implementation.
Great. Well, we'll be very excited to see what comes next with the organization, and thank you so much for coming in to speak with us today.
Thank you for allowing me to speak about Sanctuary for Families' wonderful work.